So I've just recorded a quick demo to use with today's plugin, and I literally recorded it just a few minutes ago, which is my way of saying it may not be very good, to be honest, but it's good enough to demonstrate this plugin. Let's just have a quick listen to give you a bit of context. Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. We're going to be using the analog delay plugin which comes with Studio One, and we're going to apply it to that guitar which you could hear in the demo. So I've got it ready on the right hand side in my browser here, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that you can apply it and explain the differences between the two. First of all, you could grab it and drag it across to the insert section of the channel where you want to apply it. I'll just drop it there as an insert on that guitar. You can see the plugin appears, and let's just have a quick listen. So right out of the box, it's a pretty nice sounding plugin, but I'd want to tweak it, especially the mix between the dry signal and the wet signal. So the original guitar and the delayed guitar, okay? So you would do that using this dry wet mix control in the plugin over here on the right hand side, okay? It's set to 30% by default. If you wanted to make it more wet and hear more delay, you could push it upwards. If you want to make it more dry and hear more of the original sound, you could push it downwards. Okay, but I have to say using this as an insert is not my preferred method. I much prefer to use this on an effects channel or on a bus. The reason for that is because I can treat it separately from the original signal, so I could use compression and EQ, for example, on it separately without affecting the original guitar sound, and also it means I can share this effect with other channels, other instruments. Okay, so that's my preferred method. I'll just get rid of it as an insert from this guitar, and I'll grab it again, and this time I will drop it into the send section of the guitars channel. And at that point, Studio One does a few clever things. It creates an effects channel automatically, it adds the plugin as an insert on that effects channel, and it also creates a send from the original guitar there through to that effects channel. And you should also notice on the right hand side of the plugin that dry wet mix control is automatically set to 100% and it's locked. And that's because Presonus know that whenever we use effects like delay or reverb on separate channels like buses or effects channels, we generally have them set to 100%, and we control the balance between the original sound and the effects sound by using the faders on those channels. Okay, when you start doing it this way, I think you get much more refined results, in my opinion, than using a dry wet mix control. That's just my experience anyway. Now we're going to go ahead and look at all of the controls on this plugin, starting off with the most important controls, the delay controls. When you first insert this plugin, the timing of the delay is synced to the tempo of the project in Studio One. Okay, this gives you a really sort of musical result in terms of timing, and we can see it synced because the sync button is switched on here. Okay, we can adjust the values with the timing control here, and I don't happen to think that the fact that the default value is 1/8 D is a mistake on Presonus's part, or I don't think it's random. This happens to be a very, very pleasing setting. Okay, the D in the 1/8 D stands for dotted. Okay, now in musical terms, when we talk about a dotted note, it's 1.5 times the duration of the normal note. So it's, in this case, this is a 1/8 note, but 1.5 times the normal length of a 1/8 note. The reason why I think this is pleasing is because if we just use a natural timing, and we can select them by clicking on the value here, and we can see all the available timings. If I use something like, say, 1/8 notes, okay, and my guitar part's got some regular sort of timing in it, the delays are going to land on top of the new notes that I'm playing, and rhythmically it's just going to be kind of the same as it was before. By using dotted notes, we end end up with a delay where the delayed notes end up in between the new notes that you're playing, okay, creating a new kind of rhythm to the whole thing, okay. And this just happens to be a very, very pleasing sound in my opinion. However, it's not the setting that you have to use. By all means, choose your own setting, but that's my theory for that, okay. And that's why we get this kind of result. It's just kind of a new rhythm to the whole thing. Now, the other main control that we have here is the feedback control. The way you want to think about this is you've got your original dry sound and then you've got your first repeat, your delay. And the feedback control is controlling how much of that delay gets fed back into the repeats, if you like, okay. So when we've got it, all the way down low, we just get a couple of repeats. And it's all over. If we push it back to where it was, we get a few repeats, and you can hear that they decay, okay, gradually. Now we've got the boost control here on, and if we really push this up the top, then we're going to get kind of almost like infinite delay, okay. It's going to build up. I'm not going to do that because it gets out of control pretty quickly. So I'm just going to switch boost off for a moment, and we'll have a listen to that feedback when it's up pretty loud or high. You can hear that it goes on for a long time. Now I'm going to do that again, but this time I want you to pay attention to the kind of the quality of, or the sound of the actual delays. You can hear that they do actually change in sound as well as getting quieter. And a lot of that is affected by the color controls. Now, the three controls in the color section are super useful, especially in terms of getting your delay to sit in the mix nicely, okay? We're going to listen to it outside of the mix first, but then we'll put the rest of the instruments back on in a moment. The first control I want to have a look at is the drive control, okay? So I'll just push it all the way up. This is to add some tape saturation, but when you push it all the way up, it gets really distorted in kind of a nice way, in my opinion, okay? Now I'm just going to push the feedback up a little bit so that you can really hear this. Have a listen. Can you hear how those repeats are really, really distorted? Not only do I like the sound of that, but I feel that it sort of separates the original dry sound from the delay sound a little bit more, which I think helps it in a mix a little bit to have those different characteristics. Maybe not all the way up, but it's nice to have it there at least halfway up, in my opinion, depending, of course, on the piece of music. Now, the other thing that helps out here are the low and high cut filters. They have a kind of a dual purpose, in my opinion. First of all, they create a different sound again, and by having, the low end cut out a little bit and the high end cut out a little bit, we end up with a lot which is in the middle, which creates a distinctly sort of different sound to the original sound. But also, I think the low cut's particularly helpful because with reverbs and delays, we do tend to get this sort of low end build up, which I talk about quite a lot. So it's very useful to sort of control that. So I'm actually going to push that low cut up a little bit. Have a listen again. Okay, cool. And I wouldn't have the feedback up that far, so I'll just turn that down a little bit and then just turn the rest of the mix on. Have a listen. I really think we're starting to get somewhere with this. Now, other important controls are mostly, things to do with the width, actually. We will talk about LFO and motor. I think they're going to be less used, but we'll talk about those in a moment. We'll jump over and talk about width. Now, before we look at the width knob in the width section here, let's just have a look at these different ping pong modes that we have down here. We can have ping pong switched off, which means it's not going to be doing any ping ponging. We can have sum. So what happens with the default setting, which is sum, if you've got a stereo signal, if your track is a stereo track, it's going to take the left and right channels and sum them into a mono signal before it then delays them. Now, as we do the ping pong, we're going to hear it more by pushing the width control up, okay? When we push the width control up, we're going to hear it ping ponging from left to right. Have a quick listen. And especially if you've got headphones on, you'll be able to hear that going sort of from the left to the right, okay? Now, if we switch over to 2-channel, it does it something a bit different. I can't demonstrate this to you, unfortunately, because we're basically working with a mono track with this guitar. But if you had a really stereo track, what it does with this then is it actually grabs the left and the right channels and feeds them into the delay separately, okay? Now, if you want to make that more of a mono sound, then what you can do is just push that down, okay, and it blends them together and makes it less wide. So it's a way of taking a very stereo sound and making it more monifying it, if you like. I don't know if that's a word or not, but that's what it does. So if you want to get that nice ping pong effect, I'd recommend with most of the time with vocals or guitars, more sort of mono sources, have it like that and then just play around with the width control to get a wider effect here, like this. Or less wide, maybe halfway or a bit less than that. Yeah, so you're still getting a nice stereo effect, but it's not so extreme. A really useful control. So LFO stands for low frequency oscillator. Oscillating mean that we're going to be changing something over time and not very often. So a low frequency, okay? Now the thing that we're actually going to be changing here is pitch, and we control that, how much we're changing the pitch, with the amount control here, okay? How often we make that change to the pitch is controlled by the speed control that we can see here. So let's start off with the amount on the right hand side, yeah? Because this control can be a little bit confusing at first. You would think all the way down low, yeah, to nothing means we're not changing the pitch at all, but it doesn't quite work like that. Actually, having this 0 to the center, yeah, so that it's pointing upwards, means we're not changing the pitch control. Yeah, and to start off by changing it in an upward direction, we just push this up. So start it in a downwards direction, we push it down, okay? And obviously the speed control kind of speaks for itself. Let's put a really sort of extreme setting on, yeah? Let's put this up pretty high here, and then put the speed, we'll put the speed sort of pretty fast. Have a listen to this guitar now. So that's a really extreme control. You're probably not going to do that very often unless you want a specific kind of effect. So more often than not, you'll just be adjusting it a little bit. Let's just drag this down. We'll just put it on a tiny amount here. Yeah, something like, we'll go for 0.8 and we'll put the speed down a little bit. Have a listen now. That's actually still pretty sort of prominent, but you can hear when you use it like this, you get a nice kind of almost like a chorus type of effect, okay, when you do this, yeah? Which can be quite nice. Now we can change the nature of the oscillation, the way that it's changing that, using, you know, 4 different waveforms here. Yeah, okay, so they're very typical with oscillators. You can play around with those to get different results. And in terms of the speed, if you want to, you can sync that with, again, with the tempo of your Studio One project, okay? If you want to make that a kind of a more of a musical change, that's fine. You probably wouldn't often do that, but that's how you would use that control. So now to the mysterious motor section. I say mysterious because I think this is quite confusing, and I've seen some confusion with this. And to be honest with you, the manual isn't super helpful with this Presonus, but I'll try and explain to you what I think I figured out with it, okay? So this is really essentially a timing control again, yeah? It's a little bit related to the time control that you have in delay over here. The initial setting, a factor of 1, which means it's changing it by a factor of 1, means it's not changing it at all, okay? So, you know, if we just play sort of one note, sort of 1.5 notes, you can hear those repeats as we'd expect. We've got this on a quarter setting at the moment, okay? If we push this all the way up to 2, a factor of 2, have a listen to the difference. It's it's a much faster delay time, okay? And if we push this all the way down to its lowest setting, 0.5, have a listen now. Okay, it's kind of a much slower timing, yeah, is what we get from that. So it's altering this time setting that we've got here. Now, it's sort of pointless in a way until you factor in, if you excuse the pun, this inertia setting. So if we set this initially to 0, we'll do it as 0.5. I'm going to play the track and I'm just going to gradually push this up, okay? Have a listen. You can hear this gradually speeding up as if I'm literally changing the speed of a tape. So what if I just suddenly change that from 0.5 and then I'm going to control click on it, yeah, and we'll suddenly change it to 1. Have a listen. It instantly changes, as you'd expect, okay? Bear with me here. Okay, now at the moment, the inertia setting is set to 0, so we get this instant change when we go from one factor to another. Let's push that all the way up to 5, its maximum setting, inertia of 5. Again, I'm going to set this at 0.5, and I'm going to suddenly change to a factor of 1. Have a listen. It has gradually changed from one to another, as if I hadn't suddenly changed it, but as if I'd gradually kind of pushed that control up. Now, you may be wondering, what's the point of this? To be honest with you, I'm wondering what's the point of it. I can see that it can have some sort of creative uses, and I can see that it also has some kind of similar effect sometimes if you were to move this around as the LFO a little bit. If you had minute movements. So look, let me know in the comments down below what you think the real use of this, or how you would use this for either subtle effects or very creative effects. One thing I will say about it, I'm pretty sure it's not really that valuable unless you automate this control using the automation in Studio One. Could be wrong about that. Again, let me know in the comments down below. Now, despite using things like the color controls and the mix controls to sort of blend this into the mix, I still think it's not quite there yet. The next thing I would be doing is actually ducking this delay. Now, if you don't know about ducking and you want to find out how to do it, watch this video here, which is about ducking reverb, but the same principles apply. Take a look now.